Welcome to our 12th in the series of the timeline of the exile to Jesus. And in this section, we are featuring Darius, the Persian king that followed the Persian king Cyrus. Now, going up to our chart of the timeline, we see right here where Nebuchadnezzar took the people in Israel, Jerusalem, captive to Babylon. He was the king of Babylon. His son Belshazzar was the one who had the writing on the wall, and Daniel talks about that. But Daniel goes way down into Darius, actually. And then we have basically Cyrus, we just went through that video. And that was Daniel, and then Zerubbabel and Joshua appear, and then now Darius. And we have in the second year, we're introduced to Haggai and Zechariah. And then this is brought out in the book of Ezra. In the fourth year of Darius, we have Zechariah again, and then the book of Nehemiah. So going into our notes on Darius, I'm doing as I did in the other videos. We're bringing in a lot of the scriptures that tells about what's happening during his period of his kingship. But during this period of time, there's a confluence of a bunch of people, and each one we're going to have a section on. We've already had Cyrus, and then Darius now. Daniel is during Cyrus's time. He even goes into Daniel. Then Nehemiah, who is the ruler that comes back and takes over Israel, more of a governor, not a priestly person. And then we have the Arthasasta, which the King James calls Artaxerxes, which it's not. The Arthasasta is a ruler. And it says that, we'll show you where it says that, and it could be any one of these, Darius, Cyrus, or Nehemiah himself, says is the Arthasasta. And then at the same time Nehemiah is there, Ezra comes back to Israel, and he's in the priestly class, and he writes his book. And in the book of Ezra, we'll see the persons of Zerubbabel, who was, I believe, in the priestly class. Joshua, I think he was a high priest at one time. And then the prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, who wrote books in the Bible, Haggai and Zechariah, which we will be going through after we finish the timeline. So a confluence of all of this. It's difficult for me to figure out which one to start with next, because they all pop up in different places in the same people in different ways. But Darius ruled from 550 to 486 BC. He was the empire of the Achaemenidae. That's how it's pronounced in the Greek Empire. He was called the Arthasasta in Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, maybe other places. But not all Arthasasta could, like I said, also have been Cyrus or Nehemiah himself. Then it mentions that we find out a little bit down here that his father was Ahasuerus. He wasn't a son of Cyrus. And he took over here. We'll get into that. Well, right here, Daniel 5:31, it says, "And Darius of Mede took the kingdom, being 62 years old." And he is the king of Persia that invaded Greece in 490 BC, and the Persian army was defeated at the Battle of Marathon, a famous battle where I actually stayed on the Marathon Road when I went to Greece and spent a month there and ended up on the island of Patmos, but I was actually on the Marathon Road. Now, starts off with Ezra 4 5, and it says, and it's going to jump around a little bit here, but Ezra was written, and they were hiring. What he's talking about here is when the Jews came back, the people that were there didn't want them to rebuild Jerusalem, but the Jews had the permission from Cyrus, and they began to rebuild, and they were opposed by these people, Sanballat and Tobiah. And here it's talking about, and they, Sanballat and Tobiah, were hiring against them counselors to efface the counsel all the days of Cyrus, king of the Persians, and unto the kingdom of Darius, the kingdom of the Persians. So just showing that this timeline between Cyrus and Darius goes on for quite a while, and many people pop up. But the first one was Daniel, and we're given information by Daniel as far as Darius. Now, he went all the way through Cyrus. Now, he started off with Nebuchadnezzar, remember, in the fiery furnace and stories. And then he went to Belshazzar, the writing on the wall, and then he went to Cyrus, and King Cyrus, we just went through that, and now Darius, and it says in 628, and Daniel prospered during the kingdom of Darius, and during the kingdom of Cyrus the Persian. Now, if you're reading that, you would think, well, Darius was first and then Cyrus was second, but that's not the case. When you go into the Bible here, it's all very, very difficult to follow because it jumps around from one place to another. The first year can be at the end of the chapter or the end of the book, and the last chapter could be at the beginning of the book, and that's happened in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and so it gets kind of confusing. And if you're just going through the Bible, reading it as it is in your hand, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, all the way through, this gets to be, it's pretty difficult to understand what's going on in timeline. But here I'm putting this out so you can get an idea where the timeline is, and hopefully that will help your studies of God's Word. So now I've highlighted the years at the beginning here where it applies. And Daniel starts in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, there's the father, of the seed of the Medes, who reigned over the kingdom of the Chaldeans. Now the Medes were defeated by the Persians, but apparently this Darius was not of the northern part of Iran, but more of the place where the Medes were. And they reigned over the kingdom of the Chaldeans, which is Babylon, in year one of his kingdom. So he was a ruler, actually of Babylon. So that's where probably maybe Daniel first ran into him. It says, and I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of the years of which the work of the Lord became to Jeremiah the prophet for a fulfillment of the desolation of Jerusalem, 70 years. And we've went through that before, the 70 years, and the book of Jeremiah goes into detail. Then Daniel 6:1, and it was pleasing before Darius, and he placed over the kingdom 120 satraps, whom Daniel was one from out of them. So now we see that Daniel, at the beginning, was placed as a ruler of King Darius' reign after Cyrus. And then in 6:6, he says, then the tacticians and the satraps stood beside the king, and he said to him, O King Darius, live into the eon. So this is just showing that Daniel was there at the beginning with Darius. And then King Darius gave orders to write a decree concerning asking a request from any god. Daniel 6:9. Daniel 6:25, it says, then Darius the king wrote to all the peoples, tribes, and languages living in all the earth, I made a decree for the one in every rule of my kingdom to be trembling and fearing from the face of the God of Daniel, for he is the living God. Now, Cyrus also realized that God, Kyrios, was the living God, but Cyrus is before Darius. But Daniel lived during both. Now it goes into Ezra, we get more information here, and it gives you the year, Ezra 4:24. Then the work of the house of God was idle in Jerusalem. So they were working on the temple and rebuilding it. And it was idle until the second year of the kingdom of Darius, king of the Persians, which it was begun during Cyrus, where Cyrus sent Nehemiah back, and then apparently Ezra went with him, and Nehemiah was working on rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. Nothing about the house itself. But here in Ezra, he does talk about it because Ezra is of the priestly class. But then in Haggai, the prophet during this time, it says, in the second year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, day 1 of the month, came the word of the Lord by the hand of Haggai the prophet. Now, we'll go into this when we get into the book of Haggai, of what he says, but this is just to show that Haggai was also there. Then in Haggai 1:14, it says, and the Lord awakened the spirit of Zerubbabel. And so now we have another person, Zerubbabel. He was a man that was a priestly man. We go into him in detail even in the book of Revelation. But here we're going to just go through and show that he appeared at this time. And then we'll, when we go, I think it's in either Haggai or Zechariah, brings out more about Zerubbabel. Where then it says, and they entered and did the works in the house of the Lord Almighty their God, in the 4th and 20th day of the 6th month, in the 2nd year of Darius the king. And Zerubbabel and Ezra were working on the temple, apparently, where Nehemiah was on the wall. And Zechariah, the other prophet during this period of time, who writes the book, Zechariah, says in the 8th month of the 2nd year. So now I put it, this is the 24th of the 6th month, and now we're in the 8th month, unto Darius came to pass the word of the Lord to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, son of Iddo the prophet. And again, we're going to go through Zechariah. We'll find out what all he has to say in this period of time. Next is back to Haggai 2:10. And in the 2nd year again, the 4th and 20th day, but the 9th month, a little later, of Darius came to pass the word of the Lord to Haggai the prophet. And we will go into this. We get to the book of Haggai, which we will go into detail, go through the whole book along with Zechariah. Then back into Zechariah, Zechariah 1:7, on the 4th and the 20th day of the 11th month, this is the month Shabbat in the 2nd year of Darius, came to pass of the word of the Lord to Zechariah, and we'll go through that in Zechariah. And now we jump to the 4th year. And it came to pass, in Zechariah 7:1, it came to pass in the 4th year of Darius the king, the word of the Lord came to Zechariah the 4th and the 9th of the month, which is Chislew. So again, we'll have to wait until we get to Zechariah to find out what these are all about. Then back to Ezra. But the eyes of God became upon the 5 and 6. But the eyes of God became upon the captivity of Judah, and they did not cause them to cease work until the decree was carried to Darius the king. Now the enemies of Zerubbabel and Nehemiah and Ezra and Joshua, who we find out that enemies didn't want them to rebuild anything, and they came against it, sent letters, and basically ended up going to Darius. He read it, searched out the words in the documents of Cyrus, and found where Cyrus did tell them to go back and rebuild it. And so Darius gives them a decree to go back and finish the work. And this is in Ezra 5:7. And they sent a word to him, and thus was written in it, to Darius the king, Ezra. This should be down below. And then Ezra 6:1. Then the enemies wrote to Darius, and then in Ezra 6:1, Darius the king rendered a decree to rebuild Jerusalem. And then right here in Ezra 6:12-15, it says, a decree by Darius confirming the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And then Ezekiel 12:22, it lists all the Levites who ascend during the kingdom of Darius. So the Darius, I think we've covered it pretty well. You've seen all the people that are in this man's kingdom that are in the Bible. So I believe our next video seminar is going to go through the Arthasasta. And the reason I'm using Arthasasta was not a person. It means a ruler. But King James calls him Artaxerxes, which he wasn't. Artaxerxes doesn't appear until Esther. But the Arthasasta, so we can get an idea of who the Arthasasta is in different places, where he's Cyrus and where he's Darius and where he's Nehemiah. We'll go through that to show who he is. And then after that, we'll go through Ezra and then Nehemiah. And then after those, we'll go through the timeline between between Esther and Jesus, finish the timeline, then get back to the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, and I believe I missed Habakkuk, and so which is not in this timeline at all. He was way before, but I missed it when I was going to do the video. So we'll then go through end up with the book of Habakkuk. Till the next section, hope you join us. God bless.